turned up loud enough? Everybody here okay? It's not a huge room, but we want to make sure everybody can hear what we're saying up here and questions and answers that we're going to be given up here. I want to welcome you. Thanks for coming out today. Welcome to the Community Outreach Meeting to introduce you to the Southeastern Arizona Water District Project. Really happy to see so many friends and neighbors here to come out and learn about this project. For those of you that don't know me, my name is John Shaver, and I'm one of your neighbors here. I grew up in the Kansas settlement area and live out here in Sunizona area now. I was blessed to have the opportunity to stay here, raise my family in the Sulphur Springs Valley, give them the same opportunity I had growing up in an area with wide open spaces and a feeling of a close-knit community. When challenges face a community like ours, we come together to face these challenges together, and that's why we're here today. To address another challenge, to bring to this valley a safe, reliable, and affordable residential water source for generations to come. This is a worthwhile project that when you understand what it is and what it isn't, should be something that gives you hope for the future of this valley. This is solely a residential water project. This is not in any way associated with any agricultural related water efforts. It's a way to level the playing field in an affordable way for the residents of this valley. When you look at the options at hand, drilling or deepening a well for tens of thousands of dollars, or paying a nominal fee monthly and not having to budget for a huge expenditure when things go wrong, whether it be with your well or your pump, it makes a lot of sense. Those with existing domestic wells are not limited in any way with this proposed project. It's an opt-in project. So if you aren't interested in participating as a user or a future user, you have that choice. There's nothing being proposed here for anyone to be against. The amount of water that would be used for this project will not be over and above what's being used now. All of us here use however much water we use, whether it's from a well or from a storage tank that water's hauled to. And that water is coming from the same source, from the same aquifer. The water district only uses the amount of water that people use, not more. That's been misunderstood, I think, in some of the questions we've seen. Instead of having to drill for the water or haul it, it's piped to your property. So just before, if those of you who aren't familiar with here, a few housekeeping items. The bathrooms are back in the back. We do have some donuts over there and some water. Help yourself to that. Our format today will include introducing the initial temporary board of directors, an engineering discussion, and then words from Gail Griffin, and questions from the public that have come in via our website, and discussions with people from the community. With so many questions that have come in, and with the time constraints we have here at the community center, the questions will be read aloud, and the board and Mr. Deering over here will answer as many questions as time will allow. In the meantime, feel free to write down any additional questions you may have, and we'll collect them during the meeting here and address them at the end if we have time, or we will address them via the website or future community outreach meetings. It just depends on how much time we have. And also, at the conclusion, the board members and members of the strategic planning group that have been meeting for several months, those who are here, will be available to answer questions one-on-one. We'll be staying around for a little while, and then we'll need to, because we've rented the community center for just a short period of time today. We'll need to close up here by noonish or so, or if not before. So first of all, we'll go ahead and let the initial board sitting here over to my right go ahead and introduce themselves, and we've got, we can start on that far end. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is John Park. I own a farm up in North Part of the settlement. My wife and my 3 kids and I live up there. Came to this valley in about 2005 and farmed here ever since. The reason I'm involved with this project is because looking at the community, I have neighbors that have to haul water. And I just thought it would be an improvement to the way we do things. A rural, I liken the rural water project is to rural electricity, the 50s and that time frame. And that's what I think this is. I'm kind of excited to be a part of it. I think it'll be something that really helps our community.
My name is Fred Zamora. I was born in Douglas and raised in Elfrida. Currently a farmer. I got involved also because some of my neighbors are struggling with their domestic water wells. And so, we partnered up on some of them, but looking into the future as the water declines some, I think, when somebody came up with this idea, I thought it was a great idea. So this is the way in which, everybody kind of levels the playing field between us and them. So I thought it was a great idea, and I thought I would help.
Hi, my name is Gary Fair. I've been in the valley for 7 years. I work for Riverview. We came here. The main draw when we came, there was farms for sale. The productivity of agriculture in this area was really what drew us here. And typically for us, when we'll buy a farm, and we typically will, the wells aren't deep enough, and we come in and try to improve them. With a big focus on trying to get more efficient. For my reason being involved here is it's a personal. For me and Sandy, in 2018, our well went dry. And so for us, we ended up collaborating with my father, and we drilled the well at his place, and then we brought a pipe to our house. And then since then, we brought another half a mile of pipe to Miguel, our neighbor, and also my uncle Court. And so that really got me thinking, it's like, how can we collaborate? And as we started researching, and as I became part of this group, I'm like, it really opened my eyes on how they do it in other areas of the country, and how the USDA actually helps rural areas. So that's why that sparked my interest, and so that's why I'm part of it.
Good morning, I'm Courtney Adcock. I live here in Sunizona. Moved here in 2019 after traveling around a bit with my husband. We live in an off-grid home here, so we're completely on solar. Had to put in a bunch of work to get our solar working when we first got here, and didn't have anything for water when we got here. So we hauled water for the first few years until we could save up enough money to put in a well last year. So I understand waking up and not knowing if you have enough water, or if the water is clean because it's been sitting in the tank, or any of those kinds of issues that plague a lot of people in this area, and how much time and effort goes into trying to make sure that we have drinking water, which is a basic human right that I don't think anyone should have to wake up and worry about in the morning. So that is when I was given the opportunity to be here and be part of a project that could bring clean drinking water affordably to everyone in the valley, no matter what happens in the future. I said absolutely, I'd love to be part of it. So that's why I'm here.
Good morning. Welcome, y'all. Glad you took time out of your busy days to come and learn more about our water district efforts. My name is Terry Berkey. My wife and I moved here about a little over a year ago. We live in Sunsides, just up the road. So we're actually on city water, but almost on a monthly basis I talk to people who are having trouble with their wells, or their well has gone dry, or they're worried about their well. And before we moved here, we lived for 20 years in the country. We had our own well. We know what it takes to maintain your own water. And we just like to help people who want to live in the country to maintain that rural way of life, to be able to enjoy it, the peace and the watching deer graze in your backyard or whatever. So we're just trying to help people with their water situation.
Okay, next portion here is I'm going to introduce Mr. Patrick Deering from DGR Consulting, and he's going to give us a review of the engineering aspect of a project like this.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everybody. As John mentioned, my name is Patrick Deering. I'm a professional engineer with DGR Engineering. We're a consulting engineering firm based out of Rock Rapids, Iowa. I'm in the Water Services Department there, and as the Water Services Department, we specialize in the design of rural water systems. So the board has asked me here today to give you a little bit of information about what a rural water system is and what that all entails of forming a water district in an area like this. So just a quick overview of what I'll be talking about today. Start off with what a regional water system is. Talk a little bit about what's being proposed here in Cochise County. Talk a little bit about what the costs of this proposed system are, and then go over what you can do to help participate in this water system. We'll start off, what is a regional water system? So a regional water system is a water system that serves primarily rural areas. So as opposed to like a municipal system where most communities have a public water system that they serve all of the members of that community in, where in rural areas it takes a separate water district to be formed to bring water into those areas and serve them as a large system. So that's what a regional water system is. It's typically made of smaller diameter pipelines as opposed to when you get into a municipal system, typically a 6-inch or an 8-inch line is the smallest pipe you'll see, where in a regional water system, that's actually a pretty big main line. Rural water systems are more along the lines of a 3-inch or a 4-inch main in most areas. Can get down to 2-inch pipelines, so smaller diameter pipe. And the biggest reason for that is that rural water systems typically do not provide fire protection like you have in a municipality. That's one of the main purposes, is not just provide the domestic needs of the people in the town, but also provide fire protection. Out in the rural areas, it's just too expensive to try to size the mains to move that quantity of water that quickly through a large area. So unless you're happen to be right next to a storage tank, there's not typically fire protection provided, other than possibly a hydrant out in an area close to storage where you can possibly fill a bulk tank of a fire truck or something like that. So no fire protection typically provided in a regional water system. There's usually thousands of feet of distance as opposed to multiple people and within a block. There can be thousands of feet between services, so you're typically running long distances to get to individual services. Like I said, it's a small diameter pipe, and typically a regional water system is county-wide or even multi-county systems. So here's an example of that. This is the rural water systems in South Dakota. You can see that the majority of the state is covered by one system or another. Some of them are, like I said, county-based systems. Some of them are multi-county, larger areas. And it typically depends on when those systems were formed. It's a group of people, just like is being proposed here, band together, had a need, and trying to solve some sort of water problem that they had, either quantity or quality based, and form together and form these districts. And so it's there's not a lot of community systems outside of municipalities here in Arizona, but in other parts of the country it's a pretty common occurrence. Here's another example. Here's the systems in Kansas, where this is a little bit more of the scale of what's being proposed here in Cochise County. It's more within a county based systems, a little bit smaller, larger number of systems, smaller in size. It covers most of the eastern side of Kansas. So this is just examples of what components are entailed in a regional water system. Starts off with a water source. So this is an example of some wells, and that's really what's being proposed here. In other parts of the country, you would typically have, after this, a treatment plant, where you have contaminants in the water that need to be removed. Those have a treatment system that remove those contaminants. And it always starts off with the water source, the wells. This is some examples of pipeline installation. Installation methods can be by typical excavation, trenching, plowing, directional drilling, several different ways to install pipelines, and these drill systems are typically either PVC based or high density polyethylene pipelines that get installed. Here's a few more pictures of pipe getting installed. This is up in Montana. It's a 10-inch pipeline being plowed into the ground to a depth of 8 feet. So just lots of different methods of installing pipe. So here's examples of water storage. So at the last meeting, there was a little bit of confusion about the term reservoir. So when I say reservoir, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about ground storage reservoirs, which is the tanks that you see in these pictures. I suppose down here, when I say reservoir, you think of things like Lake Mead. So if you hear me use the term reservoir, I'm talking about a water storage tank. So I'll try to keep that terminology as opposed to talking about reservoirs. But there's different types of storage. There's ground storage reservoirs with steel tanks. There's an elevated tank when you need to get the storage up further in the air to provide better pressures. That's typically in flatter areas where you need to provide pressures to a relatively flat area. There's some concrete style, precessed concrete tanks down there in the corner. So different examples of water storage. So you start off with your water source, the wells that go into pipelines that pump to storage that provide the pressure to the rural areas. At times you need to boost the pressure in the water distribution system, so you have pump stations at strategic points throughout the system to move the water and provide higher pressures, especially when you're dealing with lots of elevation. So for instance, down here in the valley, it's all relatively low elevation, but it doesn't take very long and you start getting to one mountain range or the other and start gaining elevation, and you need to add pressure into the water line to get up the hill. So you have pump stations at different points in the system. So those are the components of a typical regional water system. So why do people use regional water? What purpose do they serve? So several different reasons. One of the most common is improved reliability, and that's probably the one that applies the most here. If you're a landowner and you have a well, and that well goes dry or fails, you're without a water source, and your next option is to either drill a new well, try to rehab the well that you have, or to start hauling water. So a lot of the times when these regional water systems are formed, it's to give landowners another option, because in some parts of the country and a little bit here, you don't always have a good water source at the location that you live. And if you don't have that available to you, hauling is just very time consuming and can be expensive and is a lot of work. So just a lot of regional water systems are just to provide landowners with another option for providing a reliable water source. And the water is always available. When you have a regional water system, you have trained certified operators that if there's ever a problem with one of the facilities, with one of the pipelines, you have somebody there available 24/7 to go and make a repair and get that system back up and going. And you typically have redundancy built within the system, so that if you have one facility go down, there's another facility there. Like you saw the pictures of the pump stations. You typically have multiple pumps in there, so that if one of the pumps goes down, well, there's two others there to keep providing pressure to the system. So added reliability, better water quality. Regional water systems are required by law to comply with all primary drinking water standards, both federal and state. So as individual landowners, there's no law that says you have to comply with those drinking water standards. It takes a community system that before those laws start to apply. So if you have a contaminant in your water, there's nothing that keeps you from drinking that water. There is something from keeping a public water system from having contaminants that don't meet the primary drinking water standards. So improved water quality and continuous monitoring of those contaminants. So the state has set intervals that water systems are required to test their water for a whole list of contaminants and make sure that those contaminants aren't present in the water system. So you have somebody continuously monitoring the quality of the water and making sure that it's complying with all applicable standards. I mentioned this before, but you also have the benefit of trained and certified water professionals to operate and manage the system. And they're typically available on call to deal with any problems that come up with the system. And then you also have lower capital costs. If everyone were to drill, you know, a 1,000-foot deep well, that would get pretty expensive, as opposed to a community system that can go and drill 2 of those wells and provide water to everybody in the area. So you get an economy of scale, the more people that you can get to add on the system. So I added a picture to my slide deck here today. This is an example, and so that's not that tint is not the color of the bricks. That is the water for the community of Plentywood, Montana. And so there is actually nothing wrong with the drinking water standard of that left picture there. That's the water that was available in that community. It's got high iron content, so it just has a color to the well, but that's water is perfectly safe to drink. But it stains everything in the house, and you don't wash white clothes. I mean, it's just known that you can't use the well water to wash your clothes. So that's the water before they were hooked up to dry prairie rural water, and then the picture on the right is after. And so this is actually not an example of a water quality problem. Like I said, that's perfectly safe drinking water. This is a reliability because the city of Plentywood actually had their water source was in 60-foot deep, shallow aquifer. And so whenever there was an extended drought period, their water levels would decrease, and they'd have to go on pretty strict water restrictions to make sure that everybody in town had enough water. And that's an aquifer 60 feet deep. So that was the primary reason that they decided to hook up to dry prairie rural water. And this is a community of 2,000 people. So a regional water system just provides a community, even a large community, with another option that they wouldn't otherwise have available if they were just looking at what they have available to them right there in their area. So what they propose here in Cochise County. So here's an example of, and this is, I want to stress this is conceptual design. So nothing has been decided one way or another about what this system is or isn't going to be. What we've done is we've identified an area and looked at the initial feasibility of is it possible to build an economic system, water system in this area. So the area that we've looked at so far is kind of on the north end is Wilcox, and on the south end is McNeil, and then kind of everything in between the mountain ranges in the valley is the service area that we've identified. That if you happen to live in an area that's just outside this area, we would still encourage you to express your interest in being a part of the water system, because, like I said, this boundary is not definite. This is just the first initial guess of what this system would look like. You will see some blue areas on that map. Those are where we have existing water districts or water companies. The town of Elfrida is actually its own water district, and so they have an area including Elfrida and just surrounding outside of it. And then there's also a couple different water companies in the area, Clear Springs and Sunizona being 2 of those such water companies, and they have a defined service area where they're able to provide water to customers within those blue shaded areas. And then everything in green is what's been included in this initial conceptual water system. So just a few statistics about that green area. A little over 2,300 rural residents in that area. That's coming from the county 911 addressing structures in the county. So there's 2,300 of those not in the blue areas. 7,700 vacant parcels. I'm sure you're all aware that Cochise County has a very unique subdivided area, lots of vacant parcel out there. So several more parcels in the county than rural homes. If you were to go and connect all the 2,300 dots, that would take 300 miles of pipeline, in covering a land area of 450 square miles. And initially, in this conceptual design was included 2 wells for redundancy, 2 storage tanks, not reservoir storage tanks, and initially 5 pump stations, which is primarily, once you get up to those higher elevations around the base of the hills, you just start to get too high of elevation to serve everybody down in the valley on the same pressure zone that you have at the base of the foothills. So here's an example of the water systems that DGR Engineering works with. We're based in the upper Midwest. So this is South Dakota, Minnesota, and Iowa. Rock Rapids is in the very northwest corner of Iowa, so you can kind of see we're centered around that mass of regional systems there. And then we also have a couple systems up in the northeast corner of Montana. So that's just to give you an idea of this next statistic is an example of the different size of those systems. So what's being proposed here in Cochise County fits kind of right in the middle of those. And if you're looking at the number of customers being proposed for those systems, 2,300. You have systems with less customers, but you can see there's a pretty big difference in the number of miles that it takes to serve those customers. The 300 proposed here in Cochise County would actually be the third smallest of those systems. So that means that here in Cochise County you have a much higher density of population than typically being served in the systems that we work with up in the upper Midwest. So that actually works in your benefit because typically the more people you have within the area, the less expensive it is to get to all those people with the pipeline. You don't have to go as far and people aren't spaced out quite as much because a lot of what is the cost of these systems is the pipeline that it takes to connect all the people. So a little bit about the formation of the water system and the water board. The water district is a member governed utility district, and that's established by petition to the county. When that petition gets submitted to the county, it identifies a list of board of directors that get named in that petition. And in order to fill out that petition, 51%, a majority of either the people or the land area need to agree to be a part of that system. So whatever ultimately ends up getting defined as the boundaries of this water district, at least half the people in that area have to agree to be within the boundary of that district. So that's really what we're trying to do here is gauge the interest of who wants to be in that system and who does not. And is there parts of the system or the entire area that meets that 50% threshold, 51% threshold. So the board responsibilities, set policies for the districts, much like a school district where you have the school board that sets the policies, and then you have a superintendent that is responsible for the actual day-to-day management of the district. The board is much like a school board, setting the policies, hiring the manager and the staff of our management company, sets the budgets and the rates for the system each year, retaining consultants, professional services to help with the design, operation, legal, financial aspects of the system, monitor and approve capital planning and improvements, and then conduct monthly or quarterly meetings that are open to the public. And once the county has established, or once the water district has been established within the county, then that's the county no longer has any governance over that board. The board is appointed and then is responsible for the governance of the water district. District operation, so the day-to-day operations is handled by the staff that's been hired by the board. That usually includes a manager and various water operators to handle the day-to-day operation. That includes monitoring the operations, assuring the regulatory compliance, doing that contaminant monitoring to make sure that the system is within compliance of all the state and federal regulations. Interact with customers so that when you call with a problem, either at your home or notice something within the system that doesn't look right, there's certified operators available to go and investigate those and interact with you. Handle the monthly billing and collection of the water bills. Perform repairs and ongoing maintenance. And then recommend capital improvements to the board for any improvements needed in the system. Project funding. So the funding mechanism proposed for this project is USDA. USDA is a program, has a water and wastewater program specifically designed for systems like this to help promote the growth and economic development within rural areas. Those programs are designed for systems of 10,000 people or less, so that fits pretty well within the scope of what's being proposed here in Cochise County. The USDA has loan and grant program available, and looking at the initial project eligibility, this area does have a high grant eligibility at 55% grant eligible, which really helps offset the cost of the initial capital cost of the system. It makes it more affordable for the people if you can get a high grant percentage from USDA. And they also have low interest loans. Currently the interest rate at USDA is 1.75 for the intermediate rate. So low interest loans, long terms, that also helps bring down that cost to be able to spread out those capital expenses over a longer period of time. There's also state loan and grant programs that could come into play. The state has several water programs that could be used to help finance this. Typically the grant portion, the USDA is the go-to program for those, but the state also has programs that can be tapped into to help pay for some of these costs, and then the last part is the local match, either through user fees or donations from people locally in the area. So the cost of the system, what everybody wants to know is how much is this going to cost me? And if you don't want to be on the system, the answer is nothing. If you want to be on the system, the target rate is going to be $50 minimum per month. And so that's really what the board is trying to target, is whatever scope this project ends up being. The target is to try to keep that cost down to a minimum of $50 or lower if we're able to get there, but try to make it affordable for people that want to hook onto the system. So $50 minimum per month, and then there would also be a cost per 1,000 gallons used. So you would pay a minimum $50, and then you would pay a certain cost per 1,000 of whatever actual water use you have. So we're anticipating an average water bill in the $70 to $95 range for a typical household. And that's for their domestic use. And really that's what this system is being intended for, is just domestic use. So what you use at your home, not for livestock operations or any agricultural uses. It's just for individual home usage.
Excuse me, could I just clarify? I did need, so the $50 monthly bill is a payment on the loan, and the 75, the other figure is payment for water usage?
Initially, that's what it's mostly going to be. Is most of that $50 is going to go towards paying the debt service on the system. So it's probably, the answer is probably both, but that's really what it's. The minimum is to help offset the debt, and then the cost per 1,000 goes towards operation and maintenance. And so if this was $100% grant funded, then all we would need to do is the cost per 1,000 to help with offset the operation and maintenance cost. But because there's going to be, even if there's a 55% grant, that means there's a 45% loan that needs to be paid back. And so having a minimum monthly, regardless of how much water is used, having that minimum monthly fee to pay for the debt service.
So just for travel, so it's 50, let's just say it's about $50 plus
That's right.
the usage.
Yes, yep, exactly.
So then we would say it's really more like $125.
It's total 70 to 95.
Right, yes, yeah.
About 70 to $100 to be what you'd be your total.
That'd be total.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I'm just trying to see what actual.
Yeah.
Yep, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the anticipated average household usage, which what we're talking about, is $20 to $45 or something like that for your water usage. So that's where they get that $70 to $95, because you're already, the 50's there, across the board. And then just depending on how much you use would take it to that. It's not 50 plus 70, it's 70 total, or 70 to 95 total. And that's an estimate based on what a normal household would use.
Thanks for the clarification. So ultimately, the funding agencies are going to have a lot to say about what that cost ultimately ends up being, and depending on what they are able to provide for their grant and principal forgiveness and low interest loans will help dictate what those monthly costs will be. Try to make them as low as we can. So how do we get there? So the road to completion of a water district starts off with a conceptualized project, and so that's been the activities up to this point, where interested parties have banded together and identified individual leaders and people interested in trying to solve the problem, bring an alternate water source to the area, and develop a conceptualized budget, because really the first question that if you ask somebody if they want to be on those systems, they're going to ask, okay, how much is it going to cost me? And so develop a conceptual budget for how much we think this is going to cost. Then the next step is formal organization, establishing a steering committee and an interim board. And so that's what you see up here is the interim board that's been established to help move this process along. And then the purple is where we're at right now, is public information and meetings to see what is the interest and who's interested in being a part of this system. Because really, until we've identified who's going to be a part of the system, there's no system to advance or nothing to do until we know who's going to be a part of it. So that's really where we're at now, is getting information out to the public and seeing how much interest is out there for what's being proposed here. After we've gone through that process of signups and statements of interest from the landowners, is to form a feasibility study. Now that you know who needs to be served and what the actual extent of that system is going to be, performing a feasibility study, that's something that's going to be required by USDA, is a preliminary engineering report and environmental assessment of the area being proposed, and they're going to want you to prove that the system is financially viable before they'll provide any sort of funding. So if you're able to show that in the feasibility and get enough people interested to actually be able to form a system, so after the feasibility study, we can come back with a report on the cost and the project funding, so that you can say definitively it's not, we're targeting 50, this is going to be the fees that it's going to take based on the number of people that are signed up to the system and how much it's going to cost to get to them. This is going to be the cost going forward based on the funding packages that are available. And then if enough people are saying, yep, go ahead, let's form this district, then you go forward with establishing the water district. That's where the point where you go and put in the petition to the county to actually form the water district itself and establish the board. After you actually have a system that can take on the funding for this system, you then move into the final design, permitting and easement acquisition, and then get into the actual construction. And so we're anticipating that this project, depending on what the scope will be built out in phases. So try to get parts of the system in operation and start moving water as soon as we can by defining serviceable areas and building out, and then expect a 3 to 5 year construction window to build out to the full final completion. And then once you're done with construction, you can begin with the actual operations of the system.
So 5 to 10 years, is that what you're saying for the whole process?
3 to 5 is what we're trying to target.
Right?
Yeah, and yes, 3 to 5 with construction and also with planning.
We're going through right now, that's another 3 to 5 years.
Well, hopefully not. I mean, what we're trying to do is trying to get sign up complete by June. We would like to at least have enough interest by June to know, yes, this is something worth pursuing, or there's just not enough interest to make this a viable system. So that's really
Up to us. Right, up to the community.
right. Yes, yep, totally up to whether or not people are actually going to sign up for the system. And so that's the next slide here is. This is how you express your interest and identify that you would be interested in being, so this isn't a commitment that you're going to be on the system. This is a form saying that you're interested in finding out more until we get to the piece of, okay, this is what the system is going to cost. So if you're even thinking that you're on the fence about signing, that you might be interested in hooking up to this water system, this is really the part that we need the public involvement in. We need people to express that they are interested in being part of the system. Don't assume that, that you can sit on the sidelines and this will move forward, and then once the system's actually viable and in construction that you can hook on at that time, because if there's not enough interest, this just won't move forward. So please fill out a form, express your interest. So there's a set of forms over at that table that you can fill out. There's also a online version of that form on the website that you can go to and fill out and provide. So the critical piece of information on this is your the name and location service, which is provided by your parcel ID. So if you go to the county GIS, you can look up, or if you look at your annual tax form for your property taxes, your parcel ID will be on that form, and that's the piece of information that really tells us, okay, this is where your property is at, and the one that you're trying to sign up for service. But there's other pieces of information. There's 2 levels of service being proposed in this project. One is a connection to your household with immediate service. So that's saying you want to connect in on the water system and start using water immediately. We're also planning to offer a deferred connection. So that means that you want to have the water line built to your property, but you don't intend to actually use it. So this is I just drilled my well a year ago, it's perfectly fine. I don't need to use the water, but I want to make sure that I have it long term, that I want this system to go. I want it to be an easy connection whenever I do need the water, but I don't need it right now. So
So you can have a well and the community water both on your parcel?
correct. The only thing we can't do is we can't connect the 2 together. The EPA requires that you have that's a cross connection, that you can't have a public water system tied to a private water system, but you can have both on the same property. So as long as they're not physically tied together, you can have both on your property and continue to use your well. And if you're not signed up to the system, you can continue to use your own private water source. There's nothing about this system that will prevent you from using your own private supply.
Would you be paying for even though you're not using the public water system, would you be paying?
Yep, you still have a monthly minimum, so even though you don't have a per thousand usage because you're not using any water, there would still be a monthly minimum that would help go towards that debt service to get the water to your property, basically. So there's an interest form at the table, and there will also be it's currently up online for you to be able to go and fill that out. So that is the end of the engineering portion.
Okay, so the next thing we're going to do here is Gail Griffin wasn't able to be here in person, but she did prepare a statement. I'm going to ask Peggy Judd to come up and read that. So come on up, Peggy.
Hi, I'm Peggy Judd, I'm the county supervisor representing your district here. And I want to say just real quick first that I am anxiously and actively participating in the Western Interstate Regional of the National Association of Counties, the Energy, Environment, and Land Use Committee at the National Association of Counties, and then our own state association. We have a Medium County Caucus, and each of those groups, we're focusing a whole lot on what's coming from the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan, and the Transportation and Infrastructure Plan. And I am asking that question every time. Is there money for water districts? Is there money for water districts? And we just had a meeting yesterday. There are 2 counties in the state that are actually applying their rescue plan funds to water districts, not municipal, but county water districts and or regional water districts. So I'm going to keep actively working on that. It's a very exciting prospect for me because that makes that $50 go down. Every bit we can get from another source. And so we're actually approaching this project at a really good time because that money is there. And before I read Senator Griffin's letter, I could say she's leery of federal government and overreach. And if you're not aware of that now, you know. She's leery of that. But she is really excited about using these federal funds to help augment the state's efforts to put money into water. She is very, very excited about using it for water, roads, other things like that. Because those don't limit our freedoms, but actually give us more freedom to live and have a good quality of life. So anyway, there we go. And then I'm going to read her letter. I take my glasses off to read. So this is a letter from Senator Griffin, Arizona House of Representatives, February 4th, 2022. Friends and neighbors, I appreciate that you are meeting to try and solve some of the water concerns and issues in your community. As many of you know, I have been working on the water issues we face in our communities and state for many years. I have come to know the needs and concerns facing rural Arizona. We live in a time where water has become a top priority for property owners and lawmakers, especially when it comes to safe and reliable water for our communities. I applaud the efforts being undertaken by you to meet and to discuss the community's need for a safe and reliable and long-term water service. I have been at some of the formation meetings of the Southern Arizona Water District and understand the complexities with regards to developing a water district that is able to provide the needed water for the many thousands of residents in the area. Furthermore, I have visited with residents who have drilled or are drilling wells and understand the incredible costs associated with these ventures. I would encourage you to continue in your discussions exploring the Southeastern Arizona Water District as a viable solution for the delivery of safe and reliable water into the future. I look forward to seeing you at future meetings and wish you the best in 2022. Respectfully, Gail Griffin, Representative, Legislative District 14. I'm sorry.
She's done a lot of terms. She's done a lot of terms for somebody who believes in burning.
Oh,
She could have been in the Senate or the House or the Senate or the House.
I believe.
And yet she's not here.
No, she's not.
She's not. So I just want to tell you also that the county supervisor, the board of supervisors is 100% with you on this project. If those funds were to come down from the federal government, they would have to come directly through us. And we are 100% on with helping you. Yes.
So you said the board of supervisors is 100% on board with this, is that correct?
Right.
So that sounds to me like they haven't gone to the people because there's an alternative to this, which is protecting the water rights.
That's not what I said. And actually it was described in one of the slides that you would form your district. You would take the signatures, your appointed board, which at this point would only be by petition, the board. These are volunteers is what they are actually. By petition will be on there, but when an election comes around, you'll be electing board members. Some of these people may run, some may not. Some of you may run for the next board. But for now, we'll look at your petition and literally we'll just say, are these valid signatures? Okay, there's 51%. And we will give it to you. What we're excited about is that you're working together. Continue to work together. We are just 100% thrilled that you're doing it, and we're willing to support you in any way we can. We understand the need here. The whole county does. All the Board of Supervisors understand the need. So, thank you.
Okay, so we've had a lot of questions coming into our website, questions that we took note of during community outreach, conversations in the community, etc. We've been keeping track of all that. We've got some that are recurring more often, and we wanted to address those questions here. They are definitely important to answer, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read these questions here, and then the board will answer as we go along. And in the meantime, as we've said, there are cards. If you've got questions, hold them up after you've written the questions out. If we have, we are time limited here with this location, but hold them up. Steve over here will come and pick them up from you. We're only going to address questions that have to do with this project. So if there's other projects going on that are related to agriculture, water, etc., we're talking about the residential water district here. So please feel free to write those down, and if we have the time, we'll address them here. If we don't have the time, we'll address them on our website or future meetings. So,
So wouldn't it be a good idea, excuse me, but you guys are kind of controlling, you guys are presenting, now you're going to tell us what question. Wouldn't it be good to hear the questions here first?
these questions are from the public.
Well, maybe they'll be repeated.
So everyone can ask whatever question they want on the note card. If you want to ask the question one-on-one at the end, we'll also be around for that. There is a reason.
I'm just saying.
There is
in
a,
the first meeting.
yes.
Freedom.
So there is a reason we have changed, there is
We all
a,
got to hear
yes.
each other.
So there is a reason we have changed this format.
It would be very good for the people in this room to hear each other. And then, if there's time, since your time is
So-
limited, then let's hear what came up on the website. Because we can all look on the website.
So thank you
But
for,
we're not always all together.
that is true. So let me explain why we're changing the format a little bit. The number one, actually the only purpose of this meeting, or any of these meetings, is so that people leave understanding what this project is supposed to be, what the water system is. Unfortunately,
We already understand that.
unfortunately, there are a number of people in the past meetings who have come up and been incredibly confused because the questions did not relate to the water district. And so they did not understand by the end of the meeting what we were trying to propose. So we are changing formats because one, we have not been able to keep people respectful in terms of time, because we do have a very limited time, and two, because people have not kept their questions limited to this project. We agree there are other questions in the community that should be asked, but the purpose of this meeting is to make sure that when you leave, you understand the water district. So ask any questions you want on the card. We are going to leave a lot more time at the end so that people can come up and talk to us one-on-one and ask questions one-on-one, and you can come in groups and things like that.
And these questions are from people in the community.
Yes, but you
We
already know
didn't,
the answers.
we didn't develop these questions, so.
So feel free to write questions on your note cards.
Look, we can ask the question here in person. This is what this lady is trying to say. Hear the people in the room about your project and then go to the internet stuff, y'all.
Well,
Give these people
So
a
write your
chance to
question.
talk.
yeah,
That's fine.
and we
Write
are,
your
and
questions.
that's why we're asking you to write your questions
We'll start
down.
answering them.
And we will answer those questions. So,
As soon as you have a question, feel free to raise it up and we'll start bringing them up.
right. So here we go. So the first question that's been one of the most frequently asked questions is, how is this related to the petition put on the ballot for 2022, a motion to create an active management area, and does the board support the AMA? Will an AMA affect the water district?
So as we mentioned previously, the board is not associated with the AMA. They're two separate water projects. The board is neutral when it comes to the AMA. We encourage every resident to research everything that's going on with water in the county and to make their own decisions.
I'll take your questions, by the way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To make your own decisions based on your research. We are trying to bring water, clean, healthy drinking water at an affordable price to people's doors, regardless of what happens in the future. And if an AMA were to happen in our county, it would set regulations for all, what's the right word, systems. So the Sunizona system, Clear Springs, the Elfrida Water District, and if this water district were a thing, they would set regulations in terms of amounts of water, but it shouldn't actually affect residents very much from all the research we've done in terms of how much water you use. So we are completely neutral with the AMA when it comes to the AMA and encourage residents to do their own research.
So the next question we have is, will this new water system mean more water taken out of our aquifers and more wells drying up?
Yes.
So we don't anticipate that this will have any effect on the water level of the aquifers. What we anticipate would happen is people change from their home well or their poly tank to our water system district, that their water use would more or less remain the same. So it would be a one-to-one exchange. We don't think that the water district will have any effect on the water
Where's the
system.
science, not your thinking? Where's the science behind that? It's not on your website.
Well, you wouldn't be drinking more water just because it's coming from the water district. Well, I'm just saying that it's just trading.
I'll be using more water.
It's trading the
I
system.
will get dry, and I've stopped on a limited amount because I paid for it now. So I'll be using more water.
But it's not going to be a significant change because the people who are using wells now, who want to go to this,
Gallons a month right now.
well, it's up to the people.
But that's an average, they're going by average.
Yeah,
They're going
it's-
by average residents of how much you would use per year.
But again, I want facts. I don't want what they're guessing.
Well, we
You
can-
guys have answers that keep you out of trouble. Your board, I don't trust you. There isn't nothing about what you guys have put out there that makes me believe you're doing this in my best interest. I think the water district needs to happen, because I'm out of water. I do believe it needs to happen, but I don't trust you. I want people up there that I trust. You say you spent 2 years.
These are just
Yes,
local
you're-
people
just
bringing
stop for a
people
second.
together.
Just stop for a
Okay,
second.
hang on now. We're just, no, listen, these are volunteers, and there are people who are interested can run for the board too. These are just volunteers, okay? And there's nothing that precludes anybody
So,
here from running
Dan,
for the board.
you're going to come start our meetings, right? You're going to be coming to our meetings now, the health planning and everything like that? You should be on the board. Why not?
That's what I just said.
So that's,
They are recording.
Yeah.
If you want to be
be
up
trusted
here,
in
I want my
your
water every day also.
yeah.
Just like the rest of these people have or don't.
You are now. So this is the thing. We're only up here because we're the ones who know the answers to the questions at this point. As soon as we have more people like you who come to our meetings who are helping do everything, you'll be up here at the next meeting. Like, right now, we're just volunteers.
You didn't have a meeting this week.
We had one, but I already, your email came at the end of it. We had one other person from the community come. All we discussed was this meeting and making sure we had everything. We're having another meeting, we haven't scheduled it yet, to start discussing flyers and mailers that need to go out, and you are on that list for that meeting. If anyone else would like to come, please let us know, because we have 2 signups so far from the Sunsite meeting who are coming. One came to our previous meeting. And we're inviting anyone who actually wants to come and help, please come and help, because then you will be the board, or some combination of all of us who are actually working together to get this going will be the board. So please, we haven't scheduled a meeting next, but you are on that list.
So the board's open to replacing some.
Oh, yes. So there's only 2 there's only one major requirement to be on the board when it actually becomes a thing and petition in. You have to be part of the water project. You have to actually be signed up and getting water with the water project.
That is not appropriate.
That is how the water district works. You cannot, it's actually legally, I'm pretty sure, we can check, but I'm pretty sure legally, in order to be a board member, just like in order to be on the school board, you have to be within the school locations.
But that doesn't mean that you all agree. If you're all part of this district, you're all in agreement already because you're part of the project. So I'm on the school board for Ash Creek. We often don't agree on policy.
True.
You know, so we are within the district, but
Yes.
our views can be
Which is
completely contrary.
Yes, which is good, which is why we need more
But you
people.
all agree because you're all the same company.
I'm not, there's no company.
You're all the same, it's the same Southeastern Water District.
That's
So you're part of the project.
It's just we made up a name. That is what we're trying to set up as a district.
But like, who elected you people?
We're just volunteers.
But they're not elected. You already
And
know they're volunteers. just
We're
like I am.
volunteers. We're not the board. We're just the volunteer people to be up here to answer questions.
Right, but
We're
you
just trying to
all
get
are
it going.
unanimous in that you support this.
We want a water district.
So, yes, so you want this project.
We want it, whatever the project entails, we don't know size, it's completely up to the people in in the area, what it ends up being,
But in
and it may
order-
not happen.
So in
So
order to be on the board, you have to support that to begin with.
you have to be, you want, if you, yeah, you want to have water. You want to be able to have water to people's homes in order to be able
Right,
to
so
do
you
the work.
can't have arguments against this project, or questions as to how do you get rid of the problem and how it started, and what to do with
So-
first come, first served water rights in Arizona.
So the purpose of this meeting is to talk about just this district, which like I said, may not happen. If there is not enough public support, it will not happen. And that is perfectly fine. It's unfortunate for all the people in the valley who do not have clean drinking water, and there's no alternatives for them. So we're just trying to find some solution for some people.
Right, the solution would be to keep some of these big companies out.
So I mean, naturally, if you want to be on the board, it's because you want the water district to go. Not everybody who's on the board now or in the future is going to agree on every item, just like you mentioned in the school board. Why would there's be no reason for you to want to be on the board to stop the board, So there's this, as it's been said many times, this is a volunteer program at this point. We feel strongly, I feel strongly, that this is something that could be good for the community. If not enough people think it is, it won't be. It won't go. And if that's what people want, that's fine, it's done. And there'll just be no alternative but to do it yourself later. So there are issues with water levels dropping. Nobody denies that. Yeah, but we're not here we can't solve that with this group.
Why not try to solve the underlying problem?
Well, there are other groups that are doing that. The AMA is one of them, and I don't know what else, but this is for a residential water district that we're trying to see if there's enough interest for people to be a part of it.
But it just sounds like there's a lot of money involved because you want to build like 300 miles of pipe.
There is a lot of money involved. I mean, there's a huge amount of money involved in a project like this. I mean, it's not free. And that's why they're looking at the funding through the USDA and to offset that. And then, that's why it's important for enough people to be involved in it. If there's not enough people, it won't go. If there's just barely enough people, it's going to be, it's going to be hard to keep that minimum price there. So,
I think somebody was also mentioning lack of data on the page, lack of data maybe as to how the water is being currently used, what companies are using the most water.
So again,
caps.
this project, this meeting is just about this project. I agree, a lot of those questions are important to ask. That's not the purpose of this.
But how can you
That is-
justify this without us knowing the data?
So this-
That brings this about.
This is just to help people. If people don't want this, we're done, right? So there are a lot of people here who would love for other things to happen in the valley, and possibly in the next few years there will be many other things happening in terms of water in the valley. But there are still people whose wells are dry and don't have water. And this is just a solution to try to help them. That is all we're trying to do, and if that isn't what people want, that's fine.
I think people need to see the data, or data.
I have a question.
This is
Did you write it?
This is
Is this one that you,
This is directly related to DGR. Number one, how did you all get here? And number two, after all is said and done, and if this is instituted, what will DGR's annual gross income be? That's a good question.
I mean,
Yeah, where did they come from?
Where did you come from?
Right, yeah.
so DGR is an engineering firm who has done some work in this county, and so they asked them if they would be willing to do a study and an engineering study on this project. There's not a lot of engineering firms who have built water systems, and so they have.
Engineering from where? What company brought DGR here?
DGR was here already, they working on orchards over in the Dragoon area.
Exactly, so when you talk about symbiotic relationships and getting water to the people here, if DGR is engineering with the big people that are taking the water from the aquifer initially, then how can we trust this company to do what's best for the people if they don't look at everything together?
Well, we have to start someplace with a study, right? To
The
see.
study's already been done.
No, a study for an engineering study with a water district. And unfortunately, there aren't very many engineering firms in the state of Arizona who actually, we haven't found one, that has done a water district with pipelines and pump stations and wells and who understand that. And that is the kind of study that needs to be
Gross
done.
annual income will be what for this company?
We don't know. It's a very large engineering company, and I can state, as I was a
You don't
previous
really know the
engineer,
numbers of people that will sign up in this project. What will your gross annual income be, sir? Approximately.
Yeah, he's
We don't know the project yet.
Yeah, and
You know the numbers, you know the estimate of people.
okay, so this is why we've changed this format, because the time is being used.
He would not be here unless he were making some money.
So,
It's all conjecture.
okay, so we've got questions from this crowd here. So we're gonna ask these questions. Where will the water district get their water? So
I think right now there is a proposal for 2 wells, and that would provide water for the entire area for all the residences that we're talking about. Where those wells would be, no idea. Well, do we need more than those 2 wells? Probably not. Could we do less than those 2 wells? It completely depends on how many people sign up and in what area we're in. So all of this, the reason why there aren't answers for a lot of questions is we can't answer until we know whether there's enough interest. And so that's
Interest doesn't, that's my question. Interest doesn't constitute generation of water. Hydrology does. And so it's like giving everybody a straw and saying, okay, we're going to give you some water. Where's it coming from? From the same place that's...
So I would ask, how do you get water?
From hydrology.
But how do you get water?
Hydrology.
When you drink water in the morning, how do you get water?
From my well.
From your well, okay?
But you're telling me...
And then what about your neighbor? What if your neighbor doesn't have a well? How do they get water? And what about if something happens to your well? How are you going to get water? So that is what all we're trying to do is provide water.
No, man, my question is quite simple. And I'm not trying to put me against my neighbor. What I'm asking is...
Are you providing water for your neighbor? It's not working.
Stop trying to put me against somebody because I'm not. You all supposed to be working for all of us.
Yes.
I'm working for defensive. That's the reason I'm asking about my neighbor. I'm not trying to be nasty to you all. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Okay, so all I'm asking is, where will the well get it? Where will they get their water? Because are you putting it into the same aquifer that's going dry?
We're going to put it where everybody who needs water and where everybody's wells are currently who are using water will be using the same aquifer, yes.
So we're going to go to the same aquifer that's going dry, and we're going to spread it out to make sure that our neighbor has water. Is that right?
So the wells will be deep wells for this project.
Okay.
And so whereas now currently, depending on where you live, your well might be 300 feet, 400 feet, whatever that is, and you might be getting to that, break-off point to where you're going to have to deepen it or drill a new well. But these wells will be 1,000 feet deep. They'll be down in that same aquifer, same water source, but it'll be deeper and more reliable because you've got that deeper straw down in there.
Until it dries up.
There's a hydrology report, but like this aquifer is 3,200, I believe in his report, the aquifer is like 3,200 feet deep. Our water is at about 400 today. So I mean, there's a lot of water here. especially residential water, there's a lot of water
Okay.
for a long, long time.
And there is a hydrology report on our website, and where he talks about that, where there's a hydrologist has done a study on that. And so, you know, we're not just shooting from the hip and just wishing there's water down there. They have, you know, it's a state hydrologist who's indicated that the water is there. But over time, as we know, it's going down. And so it's more difficult for me and everybody else who's a residential resident here to afford that, drilling those wells. And I mean, I've got a well on my place that's got plenty of water right now, but if it caves in, if it goes dry, whatever, 20 years from now, and my kids are still there, I'd like them to have that option of saying, okay, we'll just hook up to the water district and not have to spend $40,000 or $30,000 or whatever it is at that point to drill a new well.
But will we not be competing with the large dairies and agricultural that are all going 1,000 feet? How do we, because we're saying this is going to be long-term, how would...
But if the water level is at 400, and the bottom of the wells for this water district are at 1,000, I mean, yes, it's still going to be gradually going down to that level at some point, but, you know, you're talking 70 years maybe. I don't know. Yeah, so that's the benefit of having a collaborative district like this, is there's more funds available to drill a new well in a different location if
one person drilling.
that's right, exactly. So if it does get, just as an example, if it does get down to that 1,001 feet, it's a lot easier for 2,300 people who are monthly paying into a district to afford to drill a new well that's 1,500 feet or whatever it is at that time. You know, so that's it's like the electric co-op. You know, if one guy lived 12 miles away from the power grid, it's going to cost a fortune to run the power line to them. But if 500 people are tapped off of that line and they're sharing the cost in that, it's much more palatable and affordable for the average household. So.
Thank you. I don't want to take up all your time. I appreciate that answer, and you know, trying to figure out how we're going to get more water back into the aquifer. Is there any?
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it's a closed aquifer.
Third grade geology answer. Yes.
Well, these guys are geologists. They don't know those statistics.
But the water. But the water.
No, you know.
They live in the community.
Yeah, we're not hydrologists ourselves.
You know, there's a place actually, you know, a couple of years ago when our well was going to be running dry, there was a place, and I still have the information at home, where you can actually get a loan at 1% to drill a well.
I'm just saying,
That's right.
to try to keep the water from running off of the surface, we have to come up with a way to get it.
The surface water first come, first served in Arizona.
How do we
So when we
circumvent that?
pay off the loans for this district water, the water district, does the water district become more like a co-op like Silver Springs?
Well, Silver Springs is a private company.
DCR
So Alfredo Water District is exactly this, only started however long ago, 50 years ago. So they have to do exactly this, because it's the exact state government set up for a grid improvement district. And so they had to come up with a group of citizens who wanted this. They had to petition in an area. They had to get funding from the government, and then they had to pay a minimum in order to, just like with the electric when it was run, in order to pay for the piping. Now Alfredo Water District just pays their monthly water bill because all of their infrastructure has been paid off. Yes.
So that monthly $50 will, once we get our loans and our agricultural, you know, our grants paid back, that $50 will be just our usage and we won't have to pay the $50.
Most likely, there would most likely be some small amount in the bill for future capital improvements, such as having to re-drill a well. But yes, that is exactly it. So it would be for however the length of the loan is, 30 years or 40 years, you'd have that minimum in order to pay off that loan, and then it would just resort to most likely a usage bill.
And so if one person owns more than one property, will they have the opportunity to be piped to every property?
So you will be paying or signing up per hookup. Every hookup would have that monthly minimum and whatever your water usage is for that hookup. You could have one hookup on your property, you could have 5 hookups on your property. I mean, nobody wants that, but if you had 5 different parcels, you could have a hookup on each one, or you could just have on one. It is typically based on hookups, and that is how we're calculating, well, engineering eventually will be calculating how much things will cost is by the number of hookups in the valley.
And maybe Fred can talk a little bit about the Elfrida. So why is the cost estimate so high as compared to, for example, the Elfrida Water District?
I really think it was already explained. You know, it's your biggest cost on these systems is the installation cost. So back in the day when Elfrida initially put theirs in, obviously PVC and everything was a lot cheaper. So now, you know, that's going to be your biggest cost of putting in a system like this today. I mean, PVC, for example, in the last 3 or 4 years is, you know, tripled in price. So it is going to be expensive, but you're right. I mean, as soon as you get it all paid for, your basic monthly fee is going to go away, or most of it should, yes.
And in a community that size too, if they had to rebuild that today and start from scratch today, and there wasn't any infrastructure in place, that monthly minimum would be significantly higher than what we're talking about here, because there would be many fewer people on that system than there would be on this particular system. So it's not a one-to-one because of the number of people proposed actually for this. I mean, it's not a guarantee either. This number would be there, but it's a proposed concept because we don't know. We can't anticipate how many people would hook up. We can't anticipate the areas that they would hook up. So but we got to start someplace and look at a proposed concept. And that map that we have, maybe it'll look a lot different than that. Maybe it'll be bigger. Maybe there'll be enough interest that people, you know, that it would expand that footprint. We don't know, but we have to start someplace and say, okay, here's a base, and here's what it would look like if this number of people signed up with this footprint, and, you know, we have to start someplace to start looking at possibilities, and it's not going to cost anybody anything to get to that point to find out. And if it's not feasible, and if people don't want to do it, it won't be done. So this is not tying anybody to anything. It's just, these are educational outreaches. It's not trying to strong arm anybody into signing on to a water district. If they don't want it, they don't have to have it. So
It's preying upon people who are the most vulnerable. You know,
it's
you're
giving
not
them an
offering them
opportunity.
ownership,
It's
you know,
giving them an
or wealth.
opportunity,
You're
though.
offering them, you know, a place on the teat.
So I would agree that it would be great to be able to give everybody their own wells. Government funding is set up for infrastructure, and so this is a way that we can actually get a lot of it paid for through government funding. If there is an effort in the community to try to figure out a different way to provide water to people, I would love to be part of that as well. I'm just trying to get water to people who don't have it, and this way we can get 55% of it paid for. Like, otherwise it's just not feasible for people out here. It would be so cost exorbitant if we couldn't get that funding. And so that is why we're looking into a district, is because we can get that funding.
But why not deal with the companies that are sucking up the water in the first place?
People are growing pistachio.
Like I said,
something that people can't live on.
There's a lot of water issues in this valley, and there's a lot of good discussions that should be had. This is just one of the solutions that we're trying to try to put forward.
And there are other efforts towards that. This isn't it. This is to give an alternative for domestic or residential, however you want to phrase it, residential water. And that doesn't mean you can't have a horse or you can't have a couple cows. What they're talking about is this would be for a typical household, and that includes, you know, people with a garden and people with a few animals here and there. It's not saying that you couldn't have those things, but it's geared to the average residential property.
So when you say few animals, what does that mean?
I don't know. I have no idea. I have 10 head of cows. I'd be on it. And, you
So
know.
there's only a certain, Patrick can probably answer this better, but there'll be a certain amount of pressure that the lines can handle and also the amount of water. And so it's going to be a residential amount of water. It would be, you will not be able to take large amounts of water out of the system just because the system is not set up that way.
But like I asked earlier, even if you do have this district on your property, you are still allowed to have your water rights.
Yeah.
You still get a well, if you
Sure.
would like to dig and you can dig and you have the money to dig, drill a well.
Yeah, in some areas.
It's not taking water rights away. It's
No.
just giving them people that don't have enough money to drill that well.
Some people will hook up to a water district and still have their well, and they'll use their well for their livestock or whatever, and then use the residential water for the house and garden. You know, it opens a lot of options.
We have in South Dakota, we're on one, and they're basically, Patrick, you correct me, but it's like 10 gallons a minute, so we had a tank, and so it would fill a tank during the day, and then we had some horses, and there's just a few cattle. So I mean, you can have, like we said, a few cattle or a few horses, and it works fine. You just
What
have
if
to
you,
compare
what if you
it.
got 50 acres and you're irrigating it? What does that do to your water?
Well, if you're irrigating 50 acres,
Yes, sir.
it's probably not going to supply enough water for you to run any kind of irrigation system. But if you have a drip system on trees or something, and you have storage tanks that you run it during the day or during the night, one or the other, you could probably still do it. It's just it's a volume amount that would limit what you can do. But you can put in storage tanks. You can put in 10,000 gallons of storage and let that fill up slowly, and then drip system your trees. And, you know, there's options there too.
And you would be paying by usage, like you said. So if you were doing that and running it at night to try to make sure you had water for your garden or something, you'd be paying by usage, so you'd be paying more than someone who wasn't doing that.
Right.
I was wondering how the voting is done, how you decide, is it by,
Well, so-
because I know a number of people own a number of parcels
Right.
of land. I own one parcel
Sure.
of land. So is it one person, no matter how many parcels of land they own? Or is it by parcel of land?
I believe it would be by hookups, right?
Well, yeah, so for this, when we're trying to figure out if we have enough people to make this financially feasible and with the study, it's by hookup.
So if one person has, say, 30 different parcels of land and have 30 hookups, they get 30 votes.
It's what votes
That sounds unfair.
You're talking about like for the board of directors election
So
or
there's two
something?
different sides. I think we're confusing two things. So right now we're just looking for interest, and that's by hookup. So right now we're trying to figure out interest, and that's by hookup. And so we need to have a certain number of hookups to make it so that the price is going to be low enough that this system is feasible. That really depends on the area, how many we need. So if we find out that there's an area with lots of people who would like it, and then a lot of area that they don't, then maybe we change the area, and then that area has enough hookups that it's financially feasible for that group. When it comes to votes, which I think you're saying is that in order to form the water district, eventually there will have to be a petition that goes to the county. The area, whatever area that is decided to be based on the hookups that we figured out, inside that area, 51%
of either the landowners or the land mass, I think, is what the state of Arizona has by petition, would have to say that they want to be in the district in order for it to form through the government.
So if you had 30 parcels, you'd be one. But if that 30 parcels covers 300 acres, it would count geographically as 300 acres of the footprint. So
whatever that footprint is. But again,
yeah, whatever that
the
footprint
footprint will most likely have to change based on who's interested. And the reason we started with such a big footprint is because the more people who sign up, the cheaper this can get. So we're trying to get the very best finances for anybody who's involved. But if we can't get that much interest in different areas, this may end up just being a small water district like Alfreda. The other problem with having a small water district is that economies of scale, it just ends up getting much more expensive for upkeep and everything like that. So the more people you can help, the better, but at the same time, we have to see where the interest lies.
So I still didn't get that, because you said it's by hookup. And that's what you said, correct? It's going by hookup.
So right now, what we really care about is number of hookups, because if we don't have enough, we're done. If this gets to the next step, where we do a feasibility study, we find out the funding, we change our boundaries to actually include just the people who are interested, then the voting is the petition. And that is either 51% of people in that new area or 51% of the land mass in that area would have to agree to form the district. That's just the state of Arizona. That's how a district is formed.
So one person could have more votes than another?
Their land could vote for more towards it than others.
So it's clear that those people who own more land.
They also have to be paying to the district as well, but yes, the only way you get to have a vote into the water district is if you're part of the water district. Yeah.
Okay. So we are at the end of our time that we've reserved this building, so, but we will stay, and if you want to come up and ask questions of people on the board, any of us involved in the project at all, the strategic planning group, Patrick, you know, he's the professional engineer. If you have an engineering type question about that type of thing, we're going to be here for a while yet here, because we're going to have to pick up and clean up after everybody's gone anyway, so feel free to come on up. And thank you for coming out, and we appreciate your time today.
Are you trying?